lost in a very gory road accident, and we do pray for the families that were affected by that yesterday. This is a story that we'll be following here also today on Nation or in NTV, to just give you an update of what is happening, also some of them who are recuperating from the hospital as well. Hello, good morning. Today we'll be discussing, of course, a raft of issues in the market. Already you can see with me, is up and early. This is Jeff, right? Jeff Rudundo is the CEO of Nairobi Security Exchange, and there's a lot that we'll be discussing today on the state of economy. You can see you're up and early. We're still expecting Habil Olaka to join us. We're still expecting also Peter B. Ward from the Export Promotion Council. We still expect also Collins Odote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. Ali Kansachu is away in Mombasa. He was supposed to be here. So is Negatu. They're supposed to be here as well, but he's out of the country. So he called me yesterday, said, oh, another meeting that has been scheduled for today. I cannot make it. But nonetheless, we continue pace with the conversation. So, right, and a lot is happening on Nairobi Security Exchange. We can give us an update of that as well. And we'll take a panoramic view also of what the global economy is all about, especially now. IMF is meeting, I think, this week. And there's a statement we'll just also be playing in a moment from the director, that is Christine Lagarde, on how the global economy is faring on as well. So there's a lot we'll be discussing today. And one of the pivotal topic that we shall be looking at as well is a China debt trap diplomacy, right? That many of the economies around the world, mostly and especially in Africa, they've actually been caught up in this debt trap diplomacy. And last December, something remarkable also happened in Sri Lanka. The nation ceded control of its Habantota port, which its government had been working to develop for over 7 years, to China, which now holds a 99-year lease on the strategically located facility in the Indian Ocean. According to the New York Times reports, every time Sri Lanka's President Mahinda Rajapaksa, you saw him there, turned to his Chinese allies for loans and assistance with an ambitious port project, the answer was yes. Yes, though visibility studies said the port wouldn't work. Yes, though other frequent lenders like India had refused. Yes, though Sri Lanka's debt was ballooning rapidly under Rajapaksa. Mr. Rajapaksa was voted out of office in 2015, but Sri Lanka's new government struggled to make payments on the debt he had taken on. Under heavy pressure and after months of negotiations with the Chinese, the government handed over the port and 15,000 acres of land around it for 99 years in December. The transfer gave China control of territory just a few hundred miles off the shores of a rival India and a strategic foothold along a critical commercial and military waterway. The case is one of the most vivid examples of China's ambitious use of loans and aid to gain influence around the world and of its willingness to play hardball to collect. Shortly after China's move in Sri Lanka, the nation used similar leverage to gain a military presence in the African nation of Djibouti, where the U.S. also maintains a permanent military presence because of the nation's strategic location near the entrance to the Red Sea. Other nations that have borrowed significant amount of monies from China to develop projects supporting its Belt and Road Initiative have growing concerns about China's intentions and ability to potentially compel them into giving up their sovereignty to escape the burden of the debts they owe. We shall be discussing this, the China debt diplomacy, and what is happening so far with that as well. And you can chime in. Kenya also is in the loop as far as this is concerned. So do we also portend any challenge as far as the sovereignty is concerned with the skyrocketing debt right now that is accruing in this country? But before we head there, let's look at the good, the bad and the ugly in our dailies today. We begin with the Daily Nation. This is what is headlining the front page of the Daily Nation. Crash driver was 72 years old. 55 killed, so that number has risen to 55. 16 injured in an overloaded bus erratically driven by a driver who was completing an 800-kilometer round trip between Kakamega and Nairobi. You have this story well fleshed out on page 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 of the Daily Nation today, and you can see also a related picture there. A Kenya Red Cross official consoling relatives of the accident victims at Kericho County Referral Hospital yesterday. Also below, at least 55 people were killed when the bus overturned and its entire roof was ripped off as it rolled down a cliff. Police last evening arrested its owner, while the National Transport and Safety Authority suspended the road license of a passenger service SACCO under which the bus operated. And you can see the devastation of that particular bus, the Homeboys, where the roof actually has been raised completely. That gory accident. We shall, of course, be following the victims who are caught up in this, and we'll give you greater details of this much later in the course of the program. Let's move on and to see what we have also on the front page of the Standard. And this is your splash today. 56 die, different figures there, 55, 56 die as impunity reigns on the roads. That is what we have on the front page of the Standard. 71 passengers in 62-seater Homeboys bus. The bus was overloaded. 56 people who died in the dawn crash. 15 number of people in overloaded bus who survived. This was a death trap. Tears and blood flow, numbing grief, consternation at crash scene. Bodies are strewn all over patches of grass and muddy pools. Some are stacked in light trucks like timber. Time is 5 a.m. when Fort Tenon in Kericho County becomes a scene from hell. Once again, Kenyans pay the price of impunity on our roads with their lives. And you have this story also on page 2, 3, 4 and 5 of the Standard this morning. Also a sad but story, Kenyans use Moi Day to relax and have fun. Surprise holiday former President Spain's day dedicated to him, which a judge ordered reinstated quietly with his family in Kabarak as majority of Kenyans take a break from work and other engagements to rest, socialize, travel and make merry. That is another story that you can follow inside the Standard as well. Also, woman living with bullets in throat for 15 years. Find her story on page 6 of the Standard this morning. Let's see what the Star is holding for us. Moi Day horror, nightmare. Police say ill-fated bus had no license for night travel. And you can see also how the crowd massed to see what happened yesterday, just looking at that devastation of the wreckage of the bus there. Kenyans mourn as 56 people perish in Kericho grisly road crash. That is a story. You can see some of the victims here. We can see residents view the wreckage of Homeboys bus that crashed. That is what we have on top there, and below here also we can see survivor Dixon Munyambu at Kericho Referral Hospital. This story, you can follow it inside the Star this morning. Also, sidebar story there. Tragic Kericho, all it says, tragic Kericho bus crash survivors tell of the ordeal. You can read their story. Kutuni drafts bill to create an executive prime minister. Almost Jubilee legislators and other proponents of a referendum want many political positions abolished. Cherangani MP Joshua Kutuni has proposed a creation of a prime minister's position. That story on page 7. And poll queries. Poll agency lost millions in suspect contracts. An audit report on the IBC operations before last year's elections has revealed a possible loss of millions of shillings in suspicious contracts deals. You have that particular story on page 9 of the Star this morning. Let's see what we have on the front page of the People Daily. And this is your splash today. And you can see the wreckage has been captured here as well. And this is your splash. Don't plunge. That is what we have on the front page of the People Daily. Don't plunge. That story well fleshed out for you on page 4 and 8 of the People Daily. And the question is, who will end this slaughter on our roads? It's a commentary, right? And this is on page 10, the editorial page. Who will end this slaughter on our roads? That's the abiding question. You can follow all the commentary also inside the People Daily this morning. Let's move on and see what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. This is what you're waking up to today. Wealthy Kenyans hiding 15 trillion shillings in foreign banks. Report by American think tank shows individuals mostly use offshore accounts to hide ill-gotten wealth and evade taxes. Kenya's super rich are holding more than 14.8 trillion shillings in offshore tax havens across the world. A newly published report says the individuals who form the cream of Kenya's wealthiest mostly use their offshore accounts to hide ill-gotten trillions, evade taxes and steer clear of Kenyans' laws. The report by American think tank National Bureau of Economic Research says, and you can follow it, says, among the countries that created a lot of shell companies, relative to the size of their company. One finds Jordan, Russia, Taiwan, the UAE, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. The report says adding the list is made of countries with high offshore wealth to GDP ratios. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, banks now allowed to backlist guarantors of bad loans. Commercial banks and SACCOs can now backlist guarantors with credit reference bureaus if principal borrowers default on loans, the High Court said. And this story is on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, here you go. Billionaire starts 93 million shillings fund for Kakuzi's quarters. Billionaire investor John Kibunga Kimani has created a foundation he plans to use to hand over some 93 million shillings worth of Kakuzi shares to squatters he grew up with around the agricultural farm. You can follow this story in the Business Daily this morning. And of course, you can see also a related story there, or picture, not really related, but a standalone picture of the Dawn tragedy. The wreckage of the Kakamega-bound bus that plunged into a valley, killing at least 52 people yesterday. Also, you can see a survivor recuperating at Fort Tenan Sub-County Hospital. That story is on page 2. There's an incident there of that victim recuperating from the hospital. You can follow the story on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Allow me to show you what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo. And this is still the splash, all about the wreckage or that particular road accident. Si ajali ni mauaji. It says mwendo wa kasi, kubeba abiria kupita kiasi, kuhudumu usiku bila leseni ni baadhi ya sababu za watu 55 kufariki jana. You can follow the story on page 2 of Taifa Leo, and of course you can see also a very good bird's eye view there of that particular wreckage. And it says mabaki ya basi ya kampuni ya Western Cross Express iliyoua watu 55 na kujeruhi wengine 16 eneo la Fort Tenan jana. This is how it was, and you can see also an insert here of Joseph Oponyo akiwa amelazwa katika hospitali ya Fort Tenan. That story also continues on page 2 of the Taifa Leo. Let's move on and see what we have across the border. We can go to Tanzania, and this is what you're waking up to if you're in Tanzania. EAC reviews rules on movement of experts. This comes after a deal meant to recognize post-training certificates issued by member states failed to facilitate the movement of professionals across borders. And you have more info. Measures have largely failed, noting that several measures had already been taken to achieve a common objective of facilitating cross-border exchange of labor and services. Officials at the EAC Secretariat in the community headquarters in Arusha City, northern Tanzania, said the measures had nonetheless largely failed in that objective. That is what we have on the front page of the East African. Cooking oil saga takes a new turn. You can follow this story on page 2 of The Citizen. In Tanzania, Magufuli warns that boss amid BRT chaos is another story on page 3. And CRDB's new boss outlines growth strategies. That is the new chief executive of CRDB Bank, Mr. Abdul Majid Nsekela, yesterday pledged to deliver improved profits and dividends to the lender's shareholders, detailing 4 strategies he will employ to achieve the objectives. You can read all about that in The Citizen on page 2 today. Let's see what we have on the front page of Mwananchi, still in Tanzania. Daktari Bashiru aonya makada wanaoiponda CCM mitandaoni. That is what we have as a splash this morning. And bosi wa DAT anusurika kupoteza kazi kisa udat. That is what is a story also on the front page of Mwananchi. Let's see what we have as well on the front page of the New Times in Rwanda. If you're waking up in Rwanda, this is your splash today. Refugees acquire machine-readable travel documents. That is what we have as headline on the front page of the New Times if you're waking up in Rwanda. Also, Kagame arrives in Armenia for La Cronfoni Summit. And you can see him here. A related picture there. And Ombudsman to name and shame all corruption convicts is on page 5 of the New Times. Rwandan scoops top award at the Youth Connect Summit. That is what we have there on page 8 of the New Times if you're waking up in Rwanda. In Uganda, Daily Monitor is there, and this is your splash today. Theft of government money assets top IGP or IGG report. The findings are from an investigation carried out between July and December 2017 across ministries, agencies, departments and local governments. That story tucked away on page 4 of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. State House team recycles Museveni Independence Day speeches. That is what we have there. Copy-paste. President's Tuesday speech had paragraphs lifted word for word from last year's Independence Day speech. For them that were keen, they noticed this, and this is a story that you can follow on page 5 of the Daily Monitor, right? The communications department there of the president now in trouble. And that is a story that you want to follow inside the Daily Monitor today. Also, you can see how it was. Rain pounds Kampala. Motorists and city dwellers went through a flooded section of a road at Clock Tower on Entebbe Road in Kampala after a downpour yesterday. Sporadic rain caused flooding in and around the city. You can follow this story on page 7 of the Daily Monitor. Lukwago backs Kamia on demolitions. According to Kampala Capital City Authority, more than 500 buildings in the city have been earmarked for demolitions because they do not conform to the city physical planning requirements. Some were erected in road reserves and others in wetlands. And you have that story on page 35 of the Daily Monitor. Also, Dr. Sekandi, from Watchman to Varsity Dean. Read about all that particular story of Balab to Kashmir or Ranks to Riches stories there, right? His story is on today. A pull-out magazine inside the Daily Monitor in Uganda. Also, President wants Bigirimana on Umeme board. You can read his story on page 3. And policemen taken by armed men. That is still on page 3. Missing school girl who was 12 found unconscious. You can read about that story on page 2 of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. I want to show you also what we do have as the recent magazines. The Wall Street Journal. This is the latest that we do have. Haley to resign as envoy to UN. It's no news right now, but of course, given or the time notwithstanding, this can be the latest for us. Sears prepares to file Chapter 11. The storage retailer hires M3 partners to help on bankruptcy action. A debt deadline looms. You can follow that story on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Also, SoftBank explores acquiring majority stake in WeWork is another story. And hurricane surges towards coast. This is Hurricane Michael, which has been packing on the punch. Also, we can see it was in Florida, devastating some of course, the residents or some of the structures there. And now it is in Panama as well. We'll give you all the details of this much later in the course of the program. Hurricane Michael strengthened on Tuesday to a Category 3 storm over the Gulf of Mexico and was projected to make landfall on the Florida Panhandle on Wednesday. And that was yesterday, of which it has done that. And of course, it's also moving on, as I've mentioned, to other cities as well. And this category also arose to Category 4, I think. And you can actually read all that inside the Wall Street Journal as well. I want to show you the recent magazines that we do have today. Also, this is the latest that we do have on The Economist. If you have not grabbed your copy, this is how it looks. You can grab a copy of The Economist. The rest will replace May after the tsunami. Trade, why? USMCA. Also, bigging up the gig economy. This is China's designs on Europe, right? And this is what The Economist, the latest edition, is holding. The UK edition there, and of course you can see that particular that vintage picture there of Mona Lisa, but she's not really holding that flag. Is actually the flag of China. China designs on Europe. Remember, on the State of the Economy, we shall be discussing also the China debt trap diplomacy. That will be much later with our panelists as well, and looking at a raft of other issues as well as far as the State of the Economy is concerned here on AM Live in the Market much later. Our guests already in studio, so let's move on and to see what we have also on the front page of the other magazines. If you've not really grabbed a copy of the Harvard Business Review, this is how it looks. The business case for curiosity. It can improve your firm's adaptability and performance. This is on page 48 of the Harvard Business Review. Also, navigating talent hotspots. William Kerr, their initiative overlord, Rose Hollister and Michael D. Watkins, and Lincoln's transformative leadership. Right? You can learn about all about transformative leadership on the recent of the current Harvard Business Review. This is what is holding for you. And the Time magazine, the latest edition, is holding this particular cover for you. Inside Disney's Magic, a new way to work, a life-saving vaccine, smarter, a pizza, and more companies inventing the future. And you can see here, this is Disney CEO Bob Iger on the front page of the New Times. I want to show you also what we have on the front page of the recent National Geographic. If you've not grabbed a copy, you can do that for yourself. This is Last Tribes of the Amazon, protecting Earth's most threatened people. Right, so you can read all about this also in the recent copy of the National Geographic. Let me show you also, if you're a lover of history, what we have on the latest of the BBC also history. And this is the latest that we do have there. You can grab a copy. World War I, was it worth it? World War I, was it worth it? Right. This is what we can grab from the latest edition of the magazines that we do have as well. Just want to show you also a hard copy of what we have on the front page of the Fortune magazine and also the New African as well. Let me see if there's another magazine I'm missing out just to show you this morning, but I think those are all the magazines that you can actually grab a copy from the latest or the newsstand right now. But we do have the Fortune magazine for you. Top Gun, the 50 most powerful women, 21st edition. This is how it looks. Right inside, Walmart's biggest deal ever. This is what is on the front page of the Fortune magazine. Top Gun. And this is America's military machine. It says America's military machine is being built by women. How the CEO became the defense industry's commander. That is Marilyn Hewson, the CEO of Lockheed Martin. She's the one who's featured on the recent copy of the Fortune magazine. Find who are the 50 most powerful women in this 21st edition or this edition of the Fortune magazine. Also, the New African is focusing on Nigeria, a fascinating enigma, and you can read all about Black history as well inside the recent copy of the New African as well. So if you've not really grabbed a copy of those, you can do so for those riveting, compelling stories. Lastly, let me just show you what we do have as the editorial cartoons, and this is what has been drawn here by Munene. Year in, we will end corruption on our roads. Year out, we'll end road carnages. And people are saying we are tired. How many must die? We've had that before. And this is a reaction from the government. People are saying haki yetu, road safety, haki yetu. No government official has resigned. That is what Munene has captured for you. And also we do have Stano here in the People Daily. It's still the same story as well, right? Of road accidents in Kenya 2018. You can see that particular arrow really ticking up from January until now. It's going up, 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 and up. But you can see it's all about corruption. See this policeman with his pot belly really jutting out, and also some of the oodles of cash also jutting out every which way. And he says, well, I'll suggest you turn the graph upside down for a clear view. And of course, Wanjiku, she's wondering, the higher the graph, the bigger his tummy grows. And you can see the effect of corruption also on our roads. Also, we have the cartoon also in the Star as well. This is from my laptop. This is what Victor has drawn for us as well. The often ignored face of road carnage. And you can see that is the traffic policemen there who are aiding and abating this particular incidents in our roads as well, on our roads. This is what has been captured by Victor in the Star. Right, you can grab a copy of the dailies for those riveting stories and the magazines as well. But for now, let's see what we have in the highlights for you. Two teachers killed in a morning of terror in Arabia, Mandera. Also, we tell you, former South African Central Bank Governor Mbweni taking over as Finance Minister. The Interior and National Coordination Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i has summoned all security teams and commanders from Mandera County for a meeting in Nairobi on Monday next week. This comes after 2 non-local teachers at Arabia Boys Secondary School were killed by suspected Al-Shabaab terrorists. Reports indicate that an explosive device was thrown at the teachers' quarters by the attackers, who also sprayed bullets in the quarters occupied by 4 teachers. NTV's Mel Muyando starts us off.
Arabia Boys Secondary School in Arabia Town, Mandera County has suffered yet another attack from suspected Al-Shabaab militia. Early Wednesday morning, the teachers' quarters came under attack. An explosive device thrown at a room with 4 non-local teachers. 2 of the teachers who died are from Western Kenya.
And the bodies are now lying at the Arabia Dispensary Health, the Arabia Health Center.
Police reservists in the school compound failed to match the militants' firepower, but the situation was contained after deployment of more officers from a combined security team to reinforce those under attack. The school principal, whose room also came under attack, confirmed the incident, saying, and I quote, "Were it not by the grace of God and valiant effort by police reservists, the casualties could have been worse," end of quote. A statement from the National Police Service Commission indicates that, and I quote, "all other teachers and students are safe and no other part of the school was affected. The hunt for the attackers is ongoing," end of quote. The Mandera County Security Committee has held several meetings with Mandera County Commissioner Olaka Kutswa, saying in a statement that, and I quote, "the county with the County Education Board will make arrangements for necessary psychological support and counseling services for teachers and students," end of quote.
One thing which is very unfortunate is that less than a kilometer from here we have had a contingent of police, well armed, and they did not respond to these distress calls from the students and the teachers until 6 a.m. in the morning.
We will be supporting the families of the brave families. We will be responding to them. Indeed, we have lost great men, heroes who have served this nation.
Arabia Town, which is just 6 kilometers from the border, had been attacked in February 2017. Al-Shabaab militia attacked the Arabia police camp and made away with 4 BVR kits and 1 car. The recent attack comes days before the KCSE examination kicks off. Mel Muyando, NTV.
Across the borders, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa appointed former Central Governor Tito Mboweni as Finance Minister, replacing Lahanala Nene, who admitted to having meetings with the business family at the center of corruption allegations, that is the Gupta family. Nene first calls to resign after he admitted visiting the Gupta brothers, friends of scandal-plagued former President Jacob Zuma, who have been accused of high-level influence peddling and failing to... Settle down with our discussion this morning. We're looking at the state of economy with our panelists today, and of course just to take a panoramic view, I should say, of what is happening in the country as far as the economy is concerned, and also what is happening in the world as well as far as the economy is concerned. But of pivotal interest for us this morning also is the China debt diplomacy that they're using right now. And we'll be looking at that much later with the course of the program with our panelists, just to tell us where we're headed so far. But allow me to introduce our panelists this morning. At the top of the hour, we saw him up and early. This is Geoffrey Odundo. He's Executive Director, or the CEO actually, of Nairobi Security Exchange. We do have with us as well Dr. Collins Odote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi, advocate of the High Court, and also a columnist with the Business Daily. We do have with us Peter Biwott, who is also the CEO of Export Promotional Council. We have with us as well the CEO of Kenya Bankers Association, Habil Olaka, who is with us this morning. Remember, you can chime in, head over to our Twitter handle, which is AM Live NTV, and AM Live NTV is our profile name on Facebook. But let's see what is actually on the front page of the Business Daily, and of course this will pique the interest of Habil Olaka as well, especially with the defaulters, the guarantors. That is a sidebar story there, Habil Olaka. You can tell us more about it. It says banks now allowed to blacklist guarantors of bad loans, and this was a court case there. Commercial banks and SACCOs can now blacklist guarantors with credit reference bureaus if principal borrowers default on loans. This is according to the High Court, and the story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily. And of course, we shall be discussing also the splash which is here. Mr. Jeff, you'll tell us more about what is happening with wealthy Kenyans hiding 15 trillion shillings in foreign banks. How does it also affect, our cash flow here in the country, and people also listing at the NSE as well? But, Habil, this development, what is your reaction to it?
Yeah, I think if you look at the story, it arose out of a ruling that was made by Justice Njoka on a case that was filed against Cooperative Bank. And the issue was that they had listed a guarantor,
yes,
who effectively takes the place of the principal borrower in the event of default. And their argument was that they had not been notified. And so the ruling was that despite the fact that they had not been notified, which was an omission on the part of the bank, they still were right to have listed the guarantor to take the place of the principal borrower.
Yes.
And this goes ahead to actually fortify the position of CIS mechanism, because of the fact that for the mechanism to actually work, it has got to be seen by the fact that a defaulter has got to be appropriately identified, and therefore the profile should be properly captured within the framework for the framework to actually effectively serve the purpose for which it was set up to serve.
Yes.
Yeah.
So will this also, what does it portend for the guarantors? People now will be a bit gun-shy to guarantee anyone when you want to really take maybe a loan through the SACCO. Because
yes, when you guarantee an obligation, you should know effectively the risk you're taking. In that, in the event of default, the bank will fall back on you to take the place of the borrower, because that's the essence of the guaranteeing. The guaranteeing actually puts responsibility on you, so that you are saying that in the event the principal borrower defaults, I will step in to take the place of the principal borrower. And that's why the bank is falling back on you. Once the principal borrower has defaulted, they are supposed to take some steps and then notify you of the obligation, and then you step in to take the position. Yeah. All
right. And looking at the broader splash as well, Mr. Odundo, what will be your reaction if you just put up back that particular splash on the Business Daily about this tidy sum of money that is stashed away on offshore accounts? Wealthy Kenyans hiding 15 trillion shillings in foreign banks. These people can actually, give the Treasury the money they need, only a measly 3 trillion shillings on their budget, comfortably, and remain with 12 trillion shillings. What do we do about this particular monies? Because they say a report by the American think tank shows individuals mostly use offshore accounts to hide ill-gotten wealth and evade taxes. We are grappling with the issues of taxes here in the country, yet this ill-gotten money is stashed away.
I think, Debarl, it's very eye-catching, really, to see that kind of amount lying out there. I know there's been an effort to try and bring the money home by offering amnesties that have probably not been taken up. I think efforts should continue in terms of trying to trace all the assets and sitting outside our country to try and see how we can bring them home. I was having a chat recently with a colleague from another country in the region, and part of what they did is, as part of the amnesty offering, is to say that, for instance, if you return X amount of money, you will be entitled to keep a certain percentage legally.
Even if it was ill-gotten?
Well, the challenge you have is getting proof to do that. And so do you want to spend so much time on litigation and trying to get clarity of the source and everything? That becomes a bigger challenge. I think it's how we face our amnesty strategy on ensuring that people are comfortable in bringing back this money home and getting some sort of relief from prosecution and certain things like that. I'm not an advocate for people taking ill-gotten wealth, but I think the situation facing a lot of countries, especially in Africa, is real. That there's a lot of money sitting outside there that could actually come back home and support the economy. So it's ways of how do we approach it and make it comfortable for people to, or accommodative rather, for people to bring that money back. Yeah.
All right, let's say from Dr. Collins Odote, 15 trillion shillings, truly. These figures are outstanding.
It's a lot of money.
We only just need a slice of 5 trillion shillings. Yeah, maybe we start paying off also the Chinese debt with this. They can actually, you know, service that particular debt and even, sort of boost the budget by dishing out 3 trillion shillings.
It's actually a lot of money, Debarl, and it also goes to show the lack of effectiveness of our corruption fighting strategies. If you look at the same dailies, you will see, for example, that the CEO of EACC, his term is coming to an end just next week.
Yes.
And there's concern that he hasn't done much. A lot of times we see government signing agreements with some of these tax haven countries in terms of repatriation of ill-gotten wealth. I think the last that was signed was with Britain, when Britain was here, and even Switzerland, just trying to ask ourselves, how can we be able to repatriate? While the idea of a tax amnesty sounds bad at first instance, I think if you look at it in terms of the amounts of money involved and the lack of effectiveness of our other strategies of jailing people and those kind of things, I think giving an amnesty under very clear circumstances would actually be useful, because this amount of money out of the economy is huge, and if it came, it will solve a lot of our burdens. Just last week but one, we were discussing the fuel on the tax on fuel, and even the housing development funds. If you look at how much we're raising from that, just around 60 billion shillings or so. To look at 15 trillion and what it could do, it will actually put a big difference in our economy, and I think it's something that should be explored as a country.
Let's say from a reaction from Peter Biwott as well. Good morning.
Good morning. So thank you very much. What I would say is that if you look at what is also happening elsewhere, people who have this kind of wealth have actually invested in foundations in their countries, trying to build up, a healthcare system. If you look at the U.S., I think we have the richest citizen of the U.S., Bill Gates, and what he has done, he has started a foundation. So what actually should happen is that these Kenyans should be able to take interest in growing our economy, and possibly even bring back this amount of money, if this is really the figure outside there, and also to see that they contribute to what the country seeks to achieve. Because stashing 15 trillion Kenya shillings in abroad bank accounts can actually even lead to loss in future, because we are not permanent on earth, and sometimes you realize that many countries actually have lost money because people who own this kind of amounts of money, grew old and passed on, and this money has remained with no specific honor. So I think, as a country, all of us are duty bound, especially the top cream Kenyans, to see how they can be able to, bring back. And as one of the panelists has said, there are incentives which are actually provided so that these Kenyans can be able to return this money back. It is not necessarily that all this money is ill-gotten. Some of it could be ill-gotten, but there are those Kenyans who have worked hard and they have earned it. So why should we be afraid? Why can't you come forward, even give contributions, to certain sectors of the economy, support initiatives of government, build? Because every day we advocate for investors to come to the country, And you can be one of those investors, a domestic direct investor. You bring your money and you take part of the roads, and you know, we can use the public partnership frameworks where you can build even a road and get the toll fees and contribute to your country.
Isn't that a way of actually you'll be sanitizing this money? It's sort of a money laundering. So you'll go and then come put up a foundation. Is the doing good aspect of it, corporate social responsibility. But how did you get the money in the first place? We appreciate the good posturing as well. But how do you then tell you uncouple the ill-gotten money from the good that you're trying to do?
Maybe I can just chip in a little bit. Panelists have talked about the amnesty that was given by KRA.
Yes.
And the amnesty was expiring in June this year. Now, I think most of the people who had money out there were a bit jittery, because when the money comes in, the bank still has got an obligation, for example, to ensure that they do the necessary checks to ensure that that money was not ill-gotten. It's not proceeds of crime, for example.
Yes.
Now, so the money was not coming in. And if you realize, I think there is now some sort of like trade-off between the money coming in and the fact that you're giving some sort of like amnesty as well being extended to the owners of these funds to ensure that they are not followed in line with our laws on process of crime and anti-money laundering act. So the amnesty was now amended to give them an extended amnesty against following in case of any transgressions on process of crime and anti-money laundering act. So I think in a way we are possibly going to allow some money to come in that may not necessarily be completely clean, partly because of the fact that you now do not ask questions on whether these amounts have been ill-gotten or not, because that amnesty has been extended to these owners of these funds. And that might be a smart thing to do in a way, partly because of the fact that people are just sometimes jittery, not necessarily because the funds were illicit, but just because asking too many questions on money that is coming in, somebody just feels uncomfortable and so prefers to have it out there. But now with no questions asked, most of it will come back. The only problem is that part of it may actually be illicit, which will flow into the economy as clean money.
All right, as clean money. Before I take a short break, just briefly, Geoffrey Odundo, because we know this circulation of money offshore, even here in the country, we have people right now, and I was just speaking to some of security experts, people who are selling, safes. They're saying there's actually a very interesting uptake of safes in the country, because people are stashing the monies in their homes. They have a room full of wads of cash. This is money that is not in circulation, and we wonder why this money is being stored in the homes. And of course, people should come and actually, buy shares, things like that. And I think what is really going on, because we know also in America they have, or in the US they have the conscience fund, that if you're feeling guilty, it's sort of an amnesty, that if you're feeling guilty and your conscience, at night you're not really sleeping, you want to actually take back the money, or the monies you've stolen, you can actually, or ill-gotten money, you can actually take it back to the conscience fund, right? And they've seen all manners of people taking, even people who stole stamps, illegally, and used just stamps, they felt, yeah, this was ill-gotten. How can we as a country try and help these people? Maybe they want to actually bring back this money. Just briefly before we take a short break.
I think two things. One is the world is converging towards strengthening war on corruption, strengthening issues around integrity, and really determining the source of wealth. And it's just a matter of time before all this money gets to be identified and find its way somewhere. So with the growing effectiveness of this, the repatriation treaties,
yes,
I think people cannot say that it's going to be a very long-term strategy to keep money outside. I think we've got to be very conscious that sooner or later this money will have to be will identified and probably be recovered. Speaking about keeping the money at home, under the mattress,
yes,
in the safes, etc., I think it's a reaction to the tightening of policies around, especially the banking sector, when you have to disclose source of funds. when you're actually banking in or receiving funds, etc. So people are reacting to that and keeping these monies in what they consider options that are safe. It's not really a long-term approach for me. I mean, we've seen economies where, for instance, in India, where there was a demonetization of the currency. I mean, there was a new currency introduced, and you're required to come and exchange it for the new currency, and hence, if you fear to do that, your currency really becomes redundant, worthless, right? So I think there's been very many approaches that the government can take to get this money into the system. And so people have got to be very conscious that it's a very short-term strategy, and they've got to find ways of bringing it into the system.
Thank you.
And what you're talking about, the conscious fund, is something probably we could think about. We could think about as a country.
Right. Yeah, I think, something we can think about. But when we circle back, we're going to take a short break right now. We want to see why also the banks are skyrocketing when it comes to profitability, according to recent reports, despite the fact that, yes, we had the interest cap rates as well, but they remain resilient. And also, NSE, foreign investors' fortunes in sharp fall. This is a recent copy of the Business Daily. May just show you a bit there. And this is a story that we want to hear also from the CEO himself, what is really happening there, just to show you. He just kept me again. Let me try and just give you what we have on the front page of the Business Daily, just quickly. Yes, there you go. NSE, foreign investors' fortunes in sharp fall. Nairobi Security Exchange, foreign investors' fortunes swung sharply for the worse in the past 1 month as dollar-dominated returns turned negative with a fall in share prices and a slight weakening of the shilling. We'll get all the details from Geoffrey Odundo, who is the CEO of NSE as well. Don't go away, much more coming up on the other side of a break. Also, we'll see also our export-import deficit here in the country and the China debt diplomacy. That also will explore the other side of the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching In the Market here on AM Live, and of course we continue with the conversation apace. This is what we're looking at, of course, this morning, the state of economy, broadly what is happening in the economy, the security exchange, the banking sector, also when it comes to export and imports as well, and just checking also general overview of what is happening elsewhere in the world as well as far as the state of economy is concerned. We are holding court this morning with Peter Biwott, who is the CEO of Export Promotion Council. We have also Dr. Collins Odote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi, and also he is a columnist with the Business Daily and also an advocate of the High Court. Also, we have the CEO of Nairobi Security Exchange. This is Geoffrey Odundo. We have also the CEO of Kenya Bankers Association, Habil Olaka, who is here with us this morning. We promise to circle back and see also how the Nairobi Security Exchange is faring on so far. And we just want to hear from you, Geoffrey, what is really happening? Why the sharp decline? How is it related to the dollar? Maybe you can give us a broader overview of what is happening on that front.
Okay, thank you, Debarl. So 2018 has been a very interesting year for us. We enjoyed a very strong beginning. The first 3 months of the year, we were recording an average trading volume of about $10 million a day. This has declined sharply in the beginning of the second half to about $2 million, $2 to $3 million a day in the recent past. But the real attribute of this, today the exchange has over 70% of foreign trading on average. And what's happening globally is impacting directly on us. The increasing global trade tensions between the US and China, the issues around Brexit, the strengthening of the US economy, especially in the stock market, has seen a softening of investments or a softening of investment in emerging markets. And also the risks that face certain key emerging market players like Turkey and Argentina have just generally led to a total sort of decline in flows coming from those markets into emerging and frontier market economies. So that's been largely the fact that there's been an attrition of foreign investor activity, more so not exit. I think I'd like to clarify that. If you want to say exit, then we should be seeing actual turnovers, showing huge turnovers of money leaving, because you still have to sell the shares to retreat. But I think what people have done is sort of slow down their trading, holding their positions, as they look at how to manage the larger risks. To your question about the economy, especially around the shilling and its concerns, I must say that investors are very happy with the macros of the country. They're very happy with the stability of our shilling and the fact that it's predictable, because that becomes a very major challenge when you want to invest, when you're not sure about how the shilling will hold in the near term. And the fact that our shilling has been fairly within target range provides some level of confidence that actually they can be able to make investments and be able to exit without huge forex exposures. And it is not just a fact that the shilling is holding, but it's also supported by fundamentals. I think if you look at our forex cover, it's still around 5.6 times months in terms of cover, and all these parameters around how the economy is growing, our improved exports are increasing. So there are fundamentals that support the shilling, and which then gives a very convincing perception to the investors that Kenya is a strong economy. Now, the importance about the market is that there is a balance which you need to do. When there's an attrition from foreigners, then the domestic front has got to be stronger. But what we've seen also is that the domestic investors have also been very shy of the market in a way. Most of them are actually putting their money in government treasuries, which they consider more stable. And I attribute that to the challenge that fund managers face in providing returns in the short term. I think investors, or especially pension funds, need to give fund managers flexibility to make return reports in probably semi-annually, to allow them time to invest and be able to get adequate returns from all asset classes, including the stock market. But when there's a short-term return that you need to make, you'll only look for those markets that are giving you those immediate short-term returns. And that has to change for us to be able to balance the foreign and local investment profile on the market. Because we do have a deep local institutional pool. Pension funds control almost 1 trillion shillings today, but just about less than 30% of that is in the stock market. If we had more, then we could actually balance these exits from the foreigners.
But also the reports that we've had dismal performance when it comes to listing companies on the Nairobi Security Exchange. For the last 10 good years, we've had, I think, less than 5, if you could say, companies listing on NSE. What could be also informing this as well? Why is there a bat, or people are really gun-shy to actually list on the NSE right now?
There are many. What we've really sat down to really try and re-strategize that approach, because uptake has been a challenge, quite rightly put. We are a very attractive economy on many fronts. I mean, if you look at the growing sectors in Kenya, a lot of money, especially coming through PE funds and all these other venture capital funds, are targeting the same sectors that we are targeting.
Yes.
Telecom, technology, infrastructure, etc. Now, the issue around listings has been largely attributable to the fact that it's still a bit of more anxiety from issuers to come to the market because of lack of a clear understanding of the benefits, which we've been trying to do a lot to educate. We've been heavily, we haven't had a big government listing in the last, since Safaricom IPO, which was largely the largest listing in this region, and that catalyzes the market and encourages private sector to come. So I'd like to say that there's been a lot of factors that have been very external to what we can do to convince issuers to come. But what are we doing to change that approach? We are working towards increasing uptake by creating a new platform we're calling the Incubator Board, where companies will basically be able to be hosted on the exchange without necessarily having to comply with the regulations of the Capital Markets Authority, because they'll not be listed companies. Now, while you're hosted, you then get an experiential feeling of the market, in that you start feeling like a listed company, and also interacting with various investment and advisors towards creating or preparing you for a possible listing or raising capital on the market, with a clear understanding that you're already in the market in some form. And that sort of delivers or sort of insulates the anxiety that you have. So we are working on that, and we're also engaging with government to see how we can bring in more listings from the government sector, and a lot of good conversations are going on. This year we do expect to see a cross-listing, which we think will also be large, and we'll be able to create or sort of restart or sort of plug that negative run we've been having. So there's a lot of activity around that, and we do believe that the market is attractive enough for issuers to come in.
Right. Let's say from Collins Adote, I don't know what you're reading so far as what our CEO is saying this morning. Of course, also the glacial slowness on the uptake. What would be your reading?
I think the performance of the Nairobi Stock Exchange is invariably also a barometer of the performance of the economy. And the last time that the stock exchange was extremely robust was in the run-up to the 2007 elections. I think we had the highest number of new Kenyans joining the stock exchange. Before then, it was for old people, people who are extremely wealthy, but in the run-up to 2007, a lot of people got in. I think after that, for the last 10 years, the economy has been going through shocks and bumps. And that's also reflected in the performance of the stock exchange, especially for domestic investors. You know, people have money that for the bulk of them they consider almost wasted. People who, for example, invested in Mumia's sugar shares, which reduced heavily. People who invested in Kenya Airways. And I think because of that, there is less and less interest of ordinary Kenyans putting their money in the stock exchange. And I think that's something that requires to be dealt with, because unless you have confidence in the stock exchange based on performance, there's going to be a lot of people not being interested in going to the stock exchange. I think the related issue to that, if you look at the bad performance of some of the listed companies, it isn't because of the stock exchange. It is also because of governance issues. If you look at the challenges around Mumias, for example, if you look at the challenges around Kenya, so it therefore means that there's a link between how the stock exchange performs and how the larger economy and issues around corruption are dealt with. And I think that's something that we need to fix as a country, because unless we do so, then we'll continue having the challenges. My last issue is, and this is something that Geoffrey needs to do much more. He just spoke about the flexibility that's required, but I think there's also need for greater engagement with Kenya, so that people realize that investment in the stock exchange is not short term. It is not money that you make in a month, because that's what people did in 2007. We were running and saying, if I put in my money in a month, I will get 20% return, and we did. But now when you start not getting it, you're like, no, this is not what I want. I want to go to 90-day treasury bills. I want to go to something. We must have a much more longer-term focus in our investment decision, because that's the only way the country and the economy will grow. And that's how we'll be able to support the stock exchange.
Maybe we can hear also from Biwott to tell us more, because I think Kenyans also have this obsession with, you know, tangible assets like land. You know, they want houses, they want, you know, real estate. But when it comes to intangible assets like, you know, stock exchange and buying shares as well, I think, do you think also maybe the NSE has done a good job or a bad job in terms of educating the public of, yes, truly, it doesn't really have to be land, because the map of Kenya is not really expanding, right? And the population is growing exponentially. So what will happen 50 years from now when we have scarce resources like land? I think NSE and the shares should be the place where most Kenyans should invest. Do you think also maybe in terms of broadening their citizens' understanding on what really happens at the NSE should be taken on a wider scale?
Yes, I think that is the issue. I think what the CEO has said is the question of information. If we can be able to reach out to many Kenyans on the question of diversification of the economy, so that we don't focus, because really even when you look at what Kenyans are doing currently, they are investing a lot of their money in you know, real estate because of that quick money. So we need to enhance capacity building and sensitizations of Kenyans to realize that any savings you make, because the question of savings in the country is still quite low. So what we need to do is to reach out to, you know, the various sectors of the economy which are not well represented in the stock exchange, so that Kenyans can take interest in putting their money in shares. So I think that's one of the biggest questions that all of us should contribute to. The question of information asymmetry. And I think if the NSE can come out and hold forums and reach out to many Kenyans for all of us to understand, especially the middle class, you know, those guys who have a lot of savings, then this question can actually be able to be addressed. In terms of the economy, I think the economy has been resilient. In the last quarter, we saw that the economy actually grew by about 6.3%.
Yes.
But still, it is there are few sectors contributing to the economy. So if we can be able to, you know, ensure that majority of the sectors, and I know now we are focusing on the manufacturing. Like for example, manufacturers, there are some of our leading local investors. Can we be able to reach out to them so that they can be able to, you know, put some of their savings to the stock exchange? So maybe this is something that we need to do.
All right, so you enroping also the SMEs as well. How has been the uptake? Because also we know within the 5 good years that I think for the last 5 good years, we've seen also almost 2 million actually SMEs closing shop because of unfavorable, conducive, you know, working or business environment as well. I don't know how this has adversely affected the NSE as well.
I think I want to just provide further insights on the 2 points that have been raised. I think one, the exchange is truly the reflective of the what's happening in the economy, because we cover all the real sectors. All the sectors of the economy are actually have companies listed on the exchange, and so depending on how the sectors perform, then you have a direct measure of how those companies will perform. If it's construction, if there's a construction boom, there's definitely a good performance of our cement companies. If there's a manufacturing boom, then you have a clear correlation to the market. So we've been seeing that, and so one, it's true that it's really a reflection of that economy. However, I think the investment philosophy of the Kenyan needs to change. I mean, the investment philosophy, the investment thesis that we have, we've been predominantly real estate focused.
Yes.
But you're also seeing there's actually for the first time a decline in the prices or in the valuation of real estate in Kenya, especially the high end. There's been a very huge supply of rental space in the high end, especially residential, that is actually empty today, and people are actually losing out or making losses. However, there are solutions available on the market on how to own property in Kenya. You can actually use the real estate investment trust, for instance, a product where you don't necessarily have to own physical property. You can own a unit of a stock in a property portfolio. We have other products that, for instance, today, if you wanted to own commodities like gold, you can actually use the market as well to own an ETF. So it's a lot around the education. It's a lot around changing the overall philosophy. We are looking at how can we cascade the educational content right from high school straight to the university and also to the so that this new generation coming into the market clearly understands that you no longer have to hold physical assets and hold intangible assets. And that's the approach globally. And so we're working on how we can cascade that education content downstream. We're also working how can we then also make sure that we cut that upstream to even the current owners. And even if you have real estate today, you can convert it into shares and be able to have them and offer them to the public and be able to have a liquid asset. Because today, even if you had property and you want to realize it, when there's no clear demand for it physically, you can actually trade off the market. So there's a big focus around content, around access, around new products, and around increasing uptake, and we're working on all that. And I take this these reviews very positively, that we need to do more. We need to do more with our partners in the industry to provide more education and more understanding on the value that you have in the market. Because it's been proven over 5 years, the stock market asset class really outperforms any that you have in any other asset class in the economy. All right, thank you.
Unless Habib, you want to chime in also on this before we move on now to see also on the profitability.
I think
and how you've been
the
resilient.
only thing, I mean, I totally agree with what has been mentioned. The only thing I was going to more or less like emphasize is the awareness creation. Because you recall in 2007,
yes,
when I would say when we had almost like a boom, and a number of people were investing without really knowing the mechanics. So you'll get somebody going to a bank to get a loan, to buy shares, and expecting to repay the loan from the proceeds of the return from the investment. Yeah. This is a long-term investment. This one is because the bank loan has got a determined repayment per month. You're not going to be able to get that kind of return from the investment in the shares to repay your bank loan. But I think a number of people are not aware. So the moment you invest, for example, and the share value tanks, meanwhile you have got an obligation that is permanent and is not moving down, you have got a mismatch. And I think a number of people may have found themselves in almost stuck. Now, if there had been awareness creation, to the point whereby the person knows that you cannot borrow on fixed debt to finance an investment in shares, I think that will be critical, and that will boost the uptick of the shares, because then people go into the investment knowing the repercussions.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned also the U.S., China, of course, trade tiff that is ongoing and is adversely affecting also the dollar. It's adversely affecting us as well. I don't know what sort of mitigation, or maybe from your own perception, or you can tell us what mitigation they need to take care, because we've had this morning, we just ran a clip of Donald Trump saying that yes, we're going to also reimpose more sanctions on China. So what does it portend as well? Already we're in a dire or a slippery slope as far as that is concerned. Do we have any mitigation plan as far as these externality shocks are concerned? Or yeah, maybe even from the banking sectors. I don't know how also that has adversely affected you as well. Any of you can actually pick up. Yeah. Yes.
I think first of all, the escalating trade tensions between China and the U.S. Definitely has an impact on the stock market, most to speak because of the foreign investor activity. There'll be probably more attrition towards more developed markets because we want to play safe. Having said that, I think we, as a country, we are actually looking at how can we broaden the investment profile, because that's one mitigation. How can you broaden your investment profile internationally, for instance? How can you get more flows coming from these regions, like sort of diversifying our investment pools of capital, be they from the developed markets, Asia, which for a long time has got a very low investment in Africa. How can we attract more of those companies or more of those investors playing a role in our capital markets? It's more around diversifying that investment pool. But again, also strengthening our local investment pool. I think one of the things that has helped Kenya, and you can remember in 2008, in the global financial crisis, we did not experience the real shocks of what happened globally in a very significant way. One, because we do not have a very heavy, we had a very strong domestic front. We had a most diverse economy. We had a large investment pool of domestic money, which was helping the market to strengthen. We had, I would say, a stronger economic framework, and hence we didn't feel the real shock of what happened in the global financial crisis. There was definitely an attrition by foreigners,
yes, but
this was rebalanced by local investor participation. I think it's just around how do we manage our economy, how do we make sure that we have a good mix of domestic capital and foreign capital so that we do not overly rely on foreign capital. So there are measures that we can be able to do to mitigate that.
Right, on the, let's say from Bibiwot.
Yes, I can actually say the trade wars between China and the US can actually be looked at as an opportunity to the country, in the sense that in the wake of Brexit and nationalization of leading economies, which are actually the advocates of the market economy, Kenya has looked into diversifying our markets. As you are all aware, Kenya was the first country to ratify the African Continental Free Trade Area. So while those countries sought each other, as a country, I think we need to look into how we can be able to expand our trade, our exports to the African continent, and by ensuring that if we can be able to ensure that 22 countries actually ratify in the continent, and the continent becomes a free trade area, then investors in the US, investors in China, who already have strong interest in Kenya, can actually set base. And I think looking at trade as one contributor, because as we speak today, the flow of foreign exchange to the country, especially from export of goods and services, has not been at the level that we expect.
Yes.
So if we can be able to diversify markets as well as products, it will be able to solve some of the challenges we see at the at the stock exchange, and also broadly at the economy.
But even when we talk about the African Free Continental Trade Area, so far we saw only how many countries had ratified out of the 35?
They're about 9.
About 9.
I think
so. What is happening with the 35? All of them are actually that conference. It's measly 9. I think the last time we checked it was 2. I think Kenya and Malawi.
No, Kenya and Ghana.
Kenya and Ghana.
I think what is happening, we as a country, we are playing a leading role in terms of convincing, the other African countries. What actually should be clear is that about 54 countries actually signed. So the ratification process is what is going on, and in December, all African states are converging in Cairo, and Kenya is playing a leading role in terms of convincing, because what Africa needs to know is that if we can open the continent to trade, actually we will be able to absorb the shocks that comes as a result of Brexit and other trade wars which are happening worldwide. So it's actually a reality. It will not happen immediately, but it is going to happen within the next year and within the next 1.5 years.
Right.
And in terms of the objectives of the continent in realization of the Africa Economic Community, I think we are actually on course. In fact, it is 2018-2019, which is expected that all African countries will actually be able to sign and ratify the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Colin Sidori?
I think the tough wars between the US and China should actually not be seen as a disadvantage. While the US says we will impose sanctions on China, they couch it as if China is doing some negative things to the entire world, and that their imposing of sanctions is to the benefit of the rest of us. It isn't. I think for me, each of them is pushing for economic dominance and pushing their interests, which is a legitimate thing. I think the bigger problem is the conversations remind you of the scramble for Africa.
Yes.
Where the people who are pushing the agenda are clear about what we want, and those of us who are on the receiving end are hoping for a miracle. We don't ask ourselves, so what is our strategy and how do we align that strategy? And that's the big challenge. When the West were giving us resources, at least in a big percentage, their greatest strategy was that they would accompany it with some development assistance, and they would be giving you human rights conditionalities so that you push governance. The Chinese have said, no, we want a different strategy. We will just focus on economics. We will give you loans, we will give you cheap loans, we'll come and even help you implement. Then before you realize you're in huge debt. I remember making the case 10 years ago when China was becoming a big issue that, from an exploitation perspective, if you go to my grandmother in the village, it does not matter whether it is the Chinese or the Americans exploiting them. At the end of the day, it's being exploited. What's much more important, what then is our response strategy? How do we take advantage of this process? And I think that's where the greatest conversation is. And it boils down to a little bit of what I said, that as we look at even how we trade with our neighbors,
yes,
how do we deepen that relationship? If you go to the EAC, for example, you will find that sometimes the relationship between the EAC countries is less strong as it should be. Tanzania and Kenya will be worrying much more about how they put obstacles onto each other's way. We have a common market protocol, but we still don't want to have free movement of persons. Yet we are allowing China to come in freely. We can't be able to deal with the economic implications of a globalizing world when we don't put our agenda much more at the forefront, and when we don't strengthen our regional integration arrangements.
Thank you. Maybe just we can also look at what is happening with the banking sector, and this is what we had on the front page of the Business Daily on Tuesday. Kenyan banks defy rate caps, top profitability list, and it says the survey finds that local lenders remain among the world's top 20 with the highest rate of return. Top Kenyan banks have continued to outperform their global peers' profitability, even as they push for the repeal of the law that the caps interest rates. A newly released global banking report says. Right, and it continues on page 4. This is the London-based Financial Times newspaper says in its 2018 report that Kenya's 3 largest lenders, that is KCB, Equity Bank and Cooperative Bank, are among the world's top 20 in terms of return on assets as well. It seems also the interest cap, are you still going full steam ahead to seek the repeal of the interest caps? Because it seems you're doing pretty well, even with a slap of the interest rate which is ongoing right now. You're still seeking the repeal.
Yeah, I think the way you have put it is a bit provocative. But I think the message that is coming out is quite clear. The fact that this does not portray the whole banking industry performance. I think these are specific banks, and on the back of the interest caps, I think a number of banks have adopted well in the new environment of a capped environment, for that matter, and they have adjusted their business models to be able to survive or thrive in that kind of an environment. And those that have done well are it's beginning to show. The banks that have been mentioned are those that have adjusted their business models to fit into the capped environment pretty well. So a number of them, for example, because of the impact of the capping, where you find that there are some segments of lending that you cannot be able to advance credit at the capped rate. They are therefore looking for other opportunities. And most of them have, for example, thrived in non-funded income areas. For example, treasury trading and foreign exchange trading, where they are making quite a bit of money. There is, for example, the innovations that are, coming in, like agency banking and mobile banking, where they are making quite a bit of money. So they are moving into areas that they can see opportunities in this capped environment. Similarly, for example, trading in or buying, government treasuries is still quite a lucrative area for the banks, and so they are making quite a bit of money in that area as well. A number of them have spread into the region to take advantage of the opportunities that have come up in the region. In the region, the environment there is not capped, so they are operating in a free, environment, and so they are able to take advantage of those opportunities. So quite a bit of the profit that they are reporting are not necessarily coming from lending to the SME, so to speak.
Yes.
So comparing the cap to the profitability, I think that contrast will come up, but it's not because they are linked. I think the critical thing is for us to delink the performance of the bank to the fact that they are operating in a capped environment, and therefore should we, in fact, the argument has been that should we cap it more to reduce the profitability of the banks. I think that's missing the point, because the essence of capping was not to limit or to control the profitability of the banks. I think the essence of capping was to ensure that credit is available to the economy at an affordable price. And I think what the cap has done is it has done exactly the opposite. where credit is affordable but not available where it's most needed. And what banks are therefore doing is they are looking for how do we adjust in the current capped environment. A number of them, for example, have cut down their branch network, they have shed their employee numbers in order to minimize their costs to be able to fit into the environment. Part of it is having negative consequences on the economy. So I think the bottom line is the fact that the banks that have done well, as they are being portrayed there, does not reflect the performance of the whole industry. A number of banks actually are making losses, but that will not come out on the headline. It's those that are doing well that will come out on the headline. But the ones that are doing really struggling in the current environment, you know, they are not picked up.
Mm-hmm. All right. Dundo, before we come to Onote.
I think, first of all, to say that all the three top banks are listed on the exchange, which probably means that for you to make money, you better be listed. But having said that, I think it's really a direct correlation with expectations from your shareholders as well. Banks know that they have a promised return, they have a return they have to make to the shareholders, and hence there's a need to remodel how you do your business. And so, faced with the interest rate caps, which of course previously they were heavily reliant on interest income, they have to remodel their business. Most banks have digitized. I think Equity Bank, for instance, I think has been rated as one of the most digitized banks in the world, by the fact that they're able to offer almost a non-physical banking today. So they've really remodeled their business to achieve. And I think I would like to also make a point that sometimes seeing great performance of these banks should not be seen as a bad thing. I mean, it's important that we have very strong institutions and very dominant institutions in our country, because that's just a reflection of what the economy can do to support. Having said that, banks have also got a social responsibility to also ensure that they support sectors of growth, like SMEs. And hence, I think the CAP was aimed to address that, to allow banks to also channel funds to support SMEs, which constitute almost 80% of our companies in the country. So they've got to look at that and see how then can we have a more diversified approach in terms of our lending profile to support that sector. But at the end of the day, I think they all have a return to make. They have to address, they have to really respond to what investors want, and really this is really the point.
Right.
Yeah.
Collins?
I think I actually disagree with the KB, and the reason why you hear the conversations about profit is because banks are the ones who raised the concerns about profit. They said, you know, once the rates are capped, we are making losses, and you say, it even says, let's not talk about the ones making profit, let's talk about the ones making losses. And I think we should ask ourselves, why are those ones making losses when others are making profits? The reality is, the reason why interest rates capping hasn't led to availability of credit is because some banks are still reluctant converters to interest rates caps. They want to demonstrate that it is not working. The reality is, before the caps, banks were generally lazy. They all just wanted the easy way out, and the easy way out is to make money from unconscionable profits. The
supernormal profits that they were making.
Exactly.
Yes.
Before, they want to diversify. Before, they want adopting as much technology as possible. I think what this report demonstrates is that it is possible to make profits in a manner that is sustainable and in a manner that is fair. And that's where we should be able to be moving. For me, I agree with the Dundo. It is not wrong to make profit. Actually, banks exist to make profits. We should encourage them to make profits as much as possible. But in making so, they shouldn't be doing it in a manner that impoverishes the rest of society. Because it's only when their customers are also feeling nice that they will be investing more, and the banks will be able to make more. I think we need to start asking ourselves, how do we focus on ensuring that the banks that aren't making as much profit as possible also adopt innovative strategies which enable them to make profits and ensure that the desire of the interest rates cap is met. The desire must be that credit must not just be affordable, it must be available, and everything must be done to make that credit available much more. But that should not lead to repeal of the interest rates cap law. Repealing it, I think, will be taking us back to the bad place where we want to get away from as a country.
All right.
Maybe I make my contribution also to say that what is happening is that after the interest rate caps, also banks have looked at other sources of income, which also includes other internal charges, which they are actually implementing. And while interest rate caps might not be the best model of, regulating financial sector. But because the best model will be a country developing what we call development finance institutions. The likes of Kenya Industrial Estates, the likes of ICDC, because this is exactly what the model which India has actually used, so that there will be an alternative source of long-term financing for our industrialization, for our development aspirations, because commercial banks cannot be dependent, for long-term, industrial development objectives. And therefore, since we are currently working to ensure that development finance institutions are actually robust and working, I think that brought the question of interest rate caps. So there's also one opportunity which I've seen. Some of the banks which have actually been mentioned have been able to diversify and invest in other countries. Recently, we were in Tanzania, and I've seen a strong presence of Equity Tanzania. I've seen a strong presence of KCB Tanzania. We also went to DRC, and Equity has a strong footprint. In fact, when they arrived in Tanzania, they were, number 30-something, But as we went early this year, they were actually number 12 bank in Tanzania. So that diversification and reaching out to export financial services, to other markets is actually leading to, the increase in revenues of these banks. But I want to say that we don't have to be regulated. We don't have to be capped. I think it is the responsibility of banks and every sector of the economy to ensure that when the government, caps and says we will be lending at 14, lend at 8. I mean, you will still get profit, but you will be reaching to many sectors of the economy, and you will actually be able to contribute, to the development of the country. So we don't have to be regulated. Even what we have seen happening in the country in terms of accidents. You see, what is happening is that I think Kenyans, we are used to being monitored and being looked, so that you can be able to do the right things. Even here in Nairobi, you see police officers in every roundabout and everywhere. So if you can be able to independently work and ensure that we provide, incentives, or we provide our own, standards, then we can be able to actually grow our economy. We don't have to be followed and policed so that we can do what is the right thing for the country.
All right. You want to react on what Odote has not really agreed on you as well, and of course what Mr. Buwati is saying.
Yeah, I mean,
briefly.
There are a couple of points there that I think we need to think through. One, I think the point that comes out is the fact that banks are still making profits anyway, even in the capped environment. But I think if you look at the specific banks and go through and see whether they are making money where the economy will also be benefiting equally. Because you see, one of the points that was mentioned was the fact that the productive sectors of the economy, and that's principally the SME that is driving the growth of the economy. And that's why I think credit should be directed towards. If you check, those banks are not making money by directing their credit where it should be. So effectively, their profitability is not aligned to the supporting the economy where it should be. What has happened is that with the capping coming into place, banks are looking for alternatives in terms of where to keep yourself afloat, and not necessarily aligned to where the credit should be going. So you can say that banks have some have managed to do it. Why can't the others do it? But are we really achieving the objective, which was to ensure that credit is directed where it's most needed? That's, I think, a question that we should answer. And I think insisting that the cap should be kept in place as if it's achieving the objective, I think is missing the point as well. I think it can only be kept in place if at all we can see that it's already beginning to achieve the objective, and therefore we need to maintain it longer so that the ultimate objective can be achieved. And I don't see it achieving the objective. I think there are better ways of achieving the original objective, which was to ensure that credit goes where it's most needed, without necessarily having the caps, because they're not serving the purpose, in my view. Now, there was a question about, banks, deciding on their own to lend at, say, 8%. That may look good to the public, where a bank can decide to lend at 8%. But is it practical? Is it possible? If you're picking money from the market at 8–9%, will you be able to lend that money at 8%? Obviously, you wouldn't. So I think we need to address the real issues why credit is expensive, so that we can address the reason why the productive sectors of economy are not getting money at an affordable price. Yeah.
Right. I think, yes.
I think my point with regard to, you know, the 8%, probably we shouldn't, actually as a country, the banks should not have waited for them to be capped to 14%.
Yes.
I think there can be initiatives where banks actually look at the numbers. And I think if they could propose, they could have proposed, one bank would have proposed, let's say on their own, and offer loans at maybe 15% or even 13% or even 14%. I mean, we don't need to be regulated to do that.
Yes.
And I think if Kenyans can be able to come up with initiatives on their own, I mean, issues of interest rates caps would not be a question, actually.
Right. Well, unless you've got, I can see.
And that's why the caps must be there, because law exists when society is unable to help society function effectively. I think Biwott even gave the example of the night buses. It just shows you that when you leave people to their own designs, they will essentially fall through the cracks. So there is a rationale as to why I think regulations exist. I think what is the point that I think is fundamental is it's important that we don't just work only based on the big stick. We must also work based on incentive, and that requires, I think, a give and take. It requires that the banks too must be proactive in terms of helping to deal with the issue about affordability and availability, because essentially what we were addressing wasn't, the interest rate cap was not addressing availability.
Yes.
It was addressing affordability.
Affordability.
Yes, money was available. It was available at a high price. Now that affordability has been dealt with, invariably we now have a problem of availability, because people are now saying we can't then give it to this sector. So we need to ask ourselves, how do we ensure that we continue ensuring that credit is available, is affordable, but not affordable not just in theory, but affordable in practice? How do we then make it available to these different sectors? And I think that's where the debate should go to.
Thank you. And of course, we'll be remiss if you, yes,
briefly. I can just add a comment on that. You know, post the capping era, I think we saw credit evolving in a given direction. A number of technos came onto the market, and they were providing credit to the market through, you know, the various alternative, the fintechs. But the critical thing is that that demonstrates also something, with the fact that the problem was not so much the pricing. The problem was actually availability of credit. Because if the market is now moving towards getting credit from the fintechs, and they're certainly not charging within the capped rate, they're certainly charging much, much more, because the evidence is quite available. You know, it shows the problem the market is having is actually availability of credit and not the price. Because it looks like people are going to get the credit at whatever price they are offered. So what you have done is you have clipped the ability of the banks to participate in the market, yet now customers are forced to go elsewhere and acquire the same credit at a much more punitive price than what you have capped the banks at.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'll be remiss because we are actually remaining with a few minutes to wind up, but we'd promised our viewers also to just try and see this China debt trap diplomacy as well. We just have a cursory look at it right now because we can't really dwell deep on it, but I want just to pick up an editorial cartoon, and Mr. Biwott may just comment on it as well and just tell us what he can see on that particular. This is China imports to Africa, and you have there, can you see, Africa exports to China. You can see the small lorry actually coming from the big plane as well. Yeah, this is a trade imbalance that we're really talking about briefly. But we looking broadly, when we talk about this particular deficit that we do have, and China with their debt trap diplomacy, we see what is happening right now with Sri Lanka, with Habantota port as well. Zambia, even now we have policemen who are Chinese. Kenya, we are actually, we've picked our tickets. Are we joining the line?
I don't think that is true, Debarl. I just wanted to say that.
What is not true?
You see, okay, actually China is not, China, from where I see China is an opportunity to us. What we see is that they are giving us a lot of support in terms of infrastructure development. They're giving us support in terms of modernizing our ports. And this is an opportunity. And what is happening is that as Kenya, or as the continent, because the way to approach China, we cannot do it alone as Kenya. The way to approach China is, can we be able to, we focus on trade, and can we be able to, as a continent, improve on our exports to China? Because they are offering us an opportunity. In fact, in November 5th to 10th, China has invited all countries of the world, and I think all African countries are there, to what we call China International Import Exposition. Actually, their theme is, you know, renewed strategy, shared growth. they have seen that they need to encourage, you know, African countries to trade more with them and export more. So the question of debt, I don't see the current levels of debt in this country as a challenge. What we should worry more as Kenyans is to be able to produce more and sell to China. In fact, if you look at percentage of debt to GDP ratio, actually Japan is the leading in the world. Japan has a GDP to debt ratio of 248%. And what they did is, as they grew their economy, they focused more on exports. They grew, you know, export of motor vehicles and other products. And as they do that, they increased, debts. So we should be worried more. How can we have more Kenyans to join the productive sector, produce more Africans and sell actually to China? So for me, China is an opportunity. I don't see them as really a trapper.
It's not really a trapper.
I don't
because now the devil is in the details, and the details is not what we're not told as a country. Right? When we have these negotiations, how prepared are we when we go to this negotiating table? Because we have these particular terms that even the country do not really know about the full details about the contracting or the contractual agreement that we have as a country with China as well. And we see these are the things that actually coming to the fore. People are actually sometimes shocked that yes, how come now our sovereignty also is being, you know, exposed, that they can actually take now our port, we can lease it for 99 years like what is happening in Sri Lanka as well. The devil's always in the details. These are things that are not really brought to the public. Even up to now, when we're talking about SGR, we do not know the fine details of this agreement as well. We've never. Unless you can tell us today, what are the details? Kenyans do not really know the details about SGR, the contractual agreements, you know, this sort of, if they're offering their loan, it is their bank will actually give us this loan. It is actually their company will run actually this particular port or for that matter, the railway line as well.
I want to tell you that by the time you see, you know, the highest leaders of the country appending their signatures, you should be confident that experts have looked into all the arrangements, all the agreements, and they have been satisfied that there is a win-win. There is a win for Kenya.
But case in point, we have Mr. Biwott is here, that they went to India, they did a feasibility studies, and they said, no, we cannot actually go full steam ahead with this particular project. Yes, though Sri Lanka debt was ballooning rapidly under Mr. Rajapaksa, who was then the president, we know they had all this evidence, but they still went full steam ahead and procured the loan. The feasibility was studied and it was done, and it appeared to be negative. I know we cannot really have time to really discuss this, yeah? Because my director, she's on my case, we should be, yes?
It can't be true.
It can't be true.
When you see the big people signing, then all the experts have looked at it.
It cannot be true.
The evidence is nothing but further from the truth. There are many international agreements, there are many engagements we've entered into other countries and regretted later. I remember once having a conversation on WTO, and the then minister who was in charge of those negotiations, I think Mr. Kirugi Mutokinde, then now was a member of parliament, was saying, you know, when I went to sign this in 1995, I had no idea what I was signing. I was just told, go ahead and sign. It's now that I'm realizing the dangers of it. I think the reality about the modern economy is that we must be able to interrogate all the decisions that are made. And if you look at China, while China may be an opportunity, the evidence is that we are actually entering into a debt trap. We are signing a lot of things that eventually look cheap credit in the first instance, but they are giving us challenges in the and I think the best example is SGR. Yes, we were given resources, but if you look at the amounts of money we have to pay for SGR vis-a-vis the returns we are getting from it, it looked good from far. I think it's now looking far from good, and I think we need to interrogate much more. It is good that they give us credit, but we need to interrogate how much credit, for what kind of use, and is it sustainable for us as a country.
Thank you. Geoffrey.
I think in closing, I just want to also, I want to disagree with Odette that we just append your signature based on maybe a hunch or something. No, I think these are very interrogated. Just before you borrow, you must go through an appraisal process of the project. No bank will lend you money if you cannot demonstrate ability to pay, or what you're going to put into the money is not feasible. So I think these are very interrogated projects, and they're actually out there to support the growth. I think China currently look like it's sort of having a heavy swing against the people they lend to. But I think if you look at Africa's demand for infrastructure. It's running to almost 170 billion. This cannot be funded through our own domestic resources. We need partners who can help us, and Chinese have stepped forward as a partner who can do that. I mean, look at the infrastructure we've had today. Forget about the SGR. Even just the roads, the bypasses, the connectivity and the ability that it has provided in terms of movements has been incredible. So we cannot just dismiss and say the Chinese is a risk. I think they have provided credit. We have to have proper experts analyzing projects, and I believe they're there to ensure that we have the ability to pay. So I do not see that we're in a trap at the moment.
Thank you. Abdullah, closing remarks?
Yeah, the only comment I was going to add on that is the fact that I think when the Chinese come with their promises, like for example the last forum for the cooperation, China-Africa summit, I think the message that came from there was that China was committing almost $60 billion and specifically channeling into Africa. Now, most of it is going towards infrastructure, and I think what we need to understand is the fact that China is not just providing some, they have got vested interests. It must be serving their interests as well, either accessing resources from Africa or being able to, get their export into the market. Now, what we need to do is to also be smart, in the sense that in that engagement, we are also benefiting out of it. And I've seen a number of countries, by the way, Malaysia, Sierra Leone, who have relooked at the agreements, commitments, and decided to cancel them, partly because of the fact that their interests are not as catered for as the Chinese have. So if you find that one contract is one way, there is no transfer of skills, there's no benefit to the economy, it doesn't benefit you, and so you can actually cancel the contract, as some of these countries have shown.
Yeah, thank you. Biwott, closing remarks, 30 seconds.
Just to say that our current debt to GDP ratio is still sustainable. We are at 58%. What the Chinese are doing is that they're helping us to build our infrastructure. Our biggest worry as Kenyans is to be able to see once the SGR is ready, it is coming with goods. When it is going back, do we have goods in the SGR? That's our biggest question as Kenyans. So we need to enhance productive capacity. There is the provision of local content. As this is happening, what Kenya receives is the technology we don't have. But Kenyans have been given an opportunity to supply up to 40% of what we can produce in the country. So
thank you.
I think this is the opportunity we see.
Thank you. All right, 30 seconds, closing remarks?
My closing remarks is I think there's a lot of work for us to do for us to be able to have an economy that is robust and sustainable. Yes, our current debt may still be sustainable at 58%, but it is tottering towards the side of unsustainability as opposed to moving towards more sustainability.
Right. Geoffrey?
I think the debate is healthy. The fact that Kenyans are more and more aware of what the government is doing, they need to and government has to be more responsive in terms of giving information to the public, because we are taxpayers. We are contributing to the government budget. I think knowing what's happening in the government, especially in terms of their debt policy and everything, is a very good thing to happen. So the debate is really healthy for me.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really want to thank you, our panelists this morning. Abil Olaka, you had your closing remarks as well. But I want to thank you this morning, Abil Olaka, the CEO of Kenya Bankers Association, for coming through. Also, Geoffrey Odunda, who is the CEO of Nairobi Securities Exchange. Thank you for coming through. Also, Dr. Collins Odote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi, also advocate of the High Court and a columnist with the Business Daily. Thank you for coming through. And finally, also Peter Biwott, who is the CEO of Export Promotion Council. Thank you for coming through. And this is the debate, of course, we'll drill deeper later also when we have our panelists and we have time as well. But for now, we want to thank you as well for your valued company. Thank you for watching AM Live. Living with Us is up next.